A devoted husband willingly enters prison for a crime designed to destroy his family, leaving his wife Isabella and twin children heartbroken, but believing they are finally safe. But 2 years later, his childhood friend David makes a discovery in an old storage unit that exposes a calculated web of lies and manipulation that will shatter everything he thought he knew about loyalty, friendship, and the ultimate price of love. In the quiet town of Riverside, nestled between rolling hills and endless farmland, Marcus Thompson had built what many considered the perfect life. At 34 years old, he owned a successful auto repair shop that had been in his family for 3 generations. His calloused hands told the tale of honest work, and his warm smile had earned him the respect of everyone in town. Isabella Thompson, his wife of 8 years, was the heart of their home. A kindergarten teacher at the local elementary school, she possessed the rare gift of making every child feel special. Her laughter could fill their modest 2-bedroom house on Oak Street, and her gentle nature had a way of calming even the most turbulent situations. Their twin children, Lucas and Sophie, had just celebrated their 6th birthday the month before. Lucas, the older by 7 minutes, carried his father's determination and curiosity about how things worked. Sophie inherited her mother's compassion and had an uncanny ability to sense when someone needed comfort. But perhaps the most significant person in their lives was David Mitchell, Marcus's childhood friend since the age of 5. David had grown up 3 houses down from Marcus, and the two had been inseparable through elementary school, high school, and even college. While Marcus chose the practical path of taking over the family business, David pursued a career in finance, eventually becoming a successful investment advisor. David never married, often joking that he was too busy taking care of his best friend's family to worry about starting his own. He lived in a modern apartment downtown, drove expensive cars, and wore tailored suits, but he spent most of his free time at the Thompson house. To Lucas and Sophie, he was Uncle David, the fun adult who brought surprises and never forgot a birthday. Isabella often marveled at their friendship. In a world where adult friendships often faded under the pressure of careers and family obligations, Marcus and David had maintained their bond with remarkable consistency. David had been the best man at their wedding, the first person they called when the twins were born, and the one who helped them through every major life decision. The 3 adults had developed a comfortable routine over the years. Sunday dinners were sacred, always held at the Thompson house, with Isabella cooking her famous pot roast and David bringing wine and dessert. During these gatherings, they would talk for hours about their dreams, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Marcus often expressed gratitude for having David in their lives. Running a small business meant long hours and financial stress, especially when major equipment needed repairs or when seasonal slumps affected revenue. David had helped them navigate several financial challenges, offering advice and even providing interest-free loans when necessary. Isabella appreciated David's presence as well, particularly during the times when Marcus worked late or traveled to automotive trade shows. David would often stop by to help with household repairs, assist with homework, or simply provide adult conversation during the long evenings when the children were asleep. Their neighbors frequently commented on their unusual friendship triangle, but never with malice. The Riverside community had watched these relationships develop over decades, and most people viewed their bond as something special and rare. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect arrangement, forces were quietly gathering that would test every assumption they had about loyalty, trust, and the true nature of human character. The trouble began on a crisp October evening, when Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. He was in his workshop, finishing up repairs on Mrs. Henderson's sedan, when his phone rang with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was rough, desperate, and unmistakably threatening. "Marcus Thompson," the voice said without preamble, "I know who you are, where you live, and where your wife works. I know your children walk to school every morning at 7:45, and I know they stop at the corner store for candy every Tuesday." Marcus's blood turned cold. He set down his wrench and moved away from the noisy compressor. "Who is this?" "Someone who has a problem that you are going to solve," the man continued. "Your friend David Mitchell owes some very dangerous people a significant amount of money, $200,000 to be exact, money that was supposed to be invested, but instead went up his nose and into casino machines. The world seemed to tilt around Marcus. David had never mentioned any financial problems, let alone gambling or substance abuse issues. You have the wrong person. David does not. David does not what? The voice interrupted with a harsh laugh. David does not have a cocaine addiction? David does not owe money to people who collect debts with baseball bats. David does not steal from his clients to fund his habits. Marcus felt his knees weaken. He leaned against his workbench, trying to process this information. What does this have to do with me? David cannot pay his debts. His assets are frozen while investigators look into his business practices. But you can pay. You have property, a business, and access to credit that he does not. I do not have that kind of money, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Then you will find it. Or your family will pay the price. We know your wife leaves school at 3:30 every afternoon. We know your children play in the backyard every evening before dinner. Accidents happen to families every day. Mr. Thompson, kitchen fires, car accidents, random violence, such tragedies. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but beneath it was a terror that threatened to consume him. Leave my family out of this. They have done nothing wrong. Neither have you, directly. But loyalty has a price. You have 72 hours to deliver the money to the address I am about to give you. If you contact the police, if you warn David, if you do anything except pay the debt, your family will suffer consequences that will haunt you for the rest of your very short life. The line went dead, leaving Marcus standing in his workshop, trembling with a combination of fear and fury that he had never experienced before. For the next 24 hours, Marcus wrestled with impossible choices. He could not possibly raise $200,000 in 72 hours. His business was successful, but not wealthy. His house was worth perhaps $150,000, but even if he could arrange an emergency loan, the paperwork alone would take weeks. He considered going to the police, but the caller's threats echoed in his mind. These were clearly people who had done their research, who knew intimate details about his family's routines. Could he risk Isabella's safety, or the lives of Lucas and Sophie, on the hope that law enforcement could protect them? He also considered confronting David directly, but he realized that might only escalate the danger. If David truly was involved with dangerous people, approaching him might trigger exactly the kind of retaliation the caller had threatened. On the second night, as Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling, while Isabella slept peacefully beside him, a desperate plan began to form in his mind. It was risky, possibly illegal, and would certainly destroy his life as he knew it. But it might save his family. The next morning, Marcus made a series of phone calls that set his plan into motion. First, he called his insurance company and reported a major theft from his auto shop. He claimed that someone had broken in during the night and stolen $50,000 worth of tools and equipment, along with $30,000 in cash that he kept for purchasing parts and paying contractors. Then he visited 3 different banks, applying for emergency business loans using his shop and house as collateral. He used his reputation in the community and the fabricated theft report to justify his urgent need for funds. By that afternoon, Marcus had managed to gather nearly $100,000 through a combination of insurance advances, loans, and liquidating every asset he could access quickly. But it was not enough, and time was running out. That evening, Marcus made the most difficult decision of his life. He drove to David's apartment and confronted his childhood friend about the debt and the threats. David's reaction confirmed Marcus's worst fears. His friend broke down completely, admitting to years of hidden addiction, financial fraud, and increasingly desperate attempts to cover his tracks. The people who had contacted Marcus were not bluffing, David explained through tears. They had already threatened him with violence, and their reputation for following through on such threats was well established. I never meant for this to touch your family, David sobbed. I thought I could fix it before anyone found out. I thought I could win back the money, or find another way to pay them back. Marcus felt a mixture of pity and rage toward his friend, but his focus remained on protecting Isabella and the twins. How much time do we have? They want the money tomorrow night. If I do not deliver it, they said they would start with your children to send a message about what happens to people who cannot pay their debts. That night, Marcus made his final desperate gambit. He returned to his auto shop and deliberately set a small fire in the office area. ensuring it would be contained, but would appear to be the result of an electrical malfunction. The insurance payout would not be immediate, but it would eventually provide enough money to cover most of David's debt. However, what Marcus did not anticipate was that the fire investigation would reveal inconsistencies in his earlier theft report. When investigators compared the timing of the alleged break-in with the fire, they found evidence that suggested both incidents were deliberately staged. Within a week, Marcus found himself under arrest for insurance fraud, arson, and filing false police reports. The evidence against him was circumstantial but compelling, and his own actions had created a pattern that looked unmistakably like deliberate criminal behavior. Faced with the choice between fighting the charges and risking a lengthy trial that would expose his family to continued danger, or accepting a plea bargain that would remove him from the situation entirely, Marcus chose what he believed was the path that would keep Isabella and the children safe. He pled guilty to all charges and accepted a 3-year prison sentence. The day Marcus was sentenced, Isabella's world collapsed in ways she never could have imagined. Sitting in the courthouse gallery with Lucas and Sophie on either side of her, she watched her husband of 8 years stand before the judge and accept responsibility for crimes she still could not fully comprehend. The Marcus she knew was honest to a fault, the kind of man who would drive across town to return a $20 bill if a cashier gave him too much change. The idea that he would commit fraud or arson seemed as foreign as suggesting he could fly to the moon. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Marcus himself had admitted guilt. During their final conversation before his incarceration, he had looked her in the eyes and told her that everything he had done was to protect their family from dangers she could not understand. "There are things happening that I cannot explain right now," he had said, holding her hands across the metal table in the jail visiting room. "But I need you to trust that everything I did was because I love you and the children more than my own life." Isabella wanted to believe him, but the financial devastation spoke for itself. The insurance companies had not only denied their claims, but were seeking restitution for the fraudulent reports. The house on Oak Street was facing foreclosure due to the loans Marcus had taken against it. The auto shop was closed permanently, its reputation destroyed by the scandal. Within 2 months of Marcus's sentencing, Isabella found herself living in a small apartment across town, working 2 jobs to support herself and the twins, and struggling to answer their constant questions about when their father would come home. Lucas had become withdrawn and angry, acting out at school and refusing to talk about his feelings. Sophie had developed anxiety that manifested in nightmares and a refusal to let Isabella out of her sight for extended periods. During this crisis, David Mitchell emerged as their unexpected lifeline. Despite his own legal troubles related to his financial practices, David had managed to avoid prison time through cooperation with authorities and restitution agreements. His investment advisory business was finished, but he had secured a position with a regional firm that allowed him to rebuild his career slowly. More importantly, David seemed genuinely committed to helping Isabella and the children navigate their new reality. He helped them find the apartment, co-signing the lease when Isabella's credit proved insufficient. He provided financial assistance for basic necessities, always framing it as repayment for years of friendship rather than charity. He spent countless hours with Lucas and Sophie, trying to fill some of the void left by their father's absence. For Isabella, David's presence was both a blessing and a source of confusion. She was grateful for his help, but she could not shake the feeling that there were aspects of Marcus's situation that she still did not understand. David claimed to know nothing about the events that led to Marcus's crimes, but Isabella sensed there were conversations and details that remained hidden from her. As months passed, David's role in their lives expanded naturally. He attended school events when Isabella could not get away from work. He helped with homework, fixed things around the apartment, and provided the stable adult presence that Lucas and Sophie desperately needed. The community's reaction to their situation was mixed. Some neighbors and friends rallied around Isabella, offering support and refusing to judge her for Marcus's actions. Others whispered about the scandal, speculating about what Isabella might have known or suspected about her husband's activities. Isabella's parents, who lived several states away, urged her to divorce Marcus and move closer to them for support. Her sister called weekly with similar advice, arguing that Isabella owed nothing to a man who had destroyed their family's financial security through criminal behavior. But Isabella could not bring herself to abandon Marcus entirely. She visited him monthly at the state correctional facility, a 3-hour drive that exhausted her both emotionally and financially. During these visits, Marcus remained consistent in his claim that his actions were meant to protect them, but he refused to provide specific details about the threats he had mentioned. "When I get out, I will explain everything," he promised during one particularly difficult visit. "Right now, the most important thing is that you and the children stay safe. David is a good man, and I am grateful that he is helping you." These conversations left Isabella more confused than comforted. Marcus seemed genuinely relieved that David was involved in their lives, which made little sense if David had somehow contributed to their problems. As the first year of Marcus's incarceration progressed, Isabella began to notice subtle changes in David's behavior. His assistance, which had initially felt like the natural support of a concerned friend, began to carry undertones that made her uncomfortable. David started making comments about Marcus's selfishness in destroying their family. He suggested that Isabella deserved better than a man who would choose criminal activity over honest communication. He began staying later during his visits, often finding reasons to be around when she was getting ready for bed, or when she was vulnerable after particularly difficult days. Isabella tried to dismiss these observations, telling herself that she was reading too much into David's kindness. After all, he had sacrificed significant time and resources to help them during their darkest period. Perhaps his growing closeness was simply the natural result of shared adversity. But as winter turned to spring, David's intentions became increasingly difficult to ignore. The shift in David's behavior began so gradually that Isabella initially dismissed it as her own paranoia. After months of stress, financial pressure, and single parenting, she assumed her discomfort was simply the result of emotional exhaustion. But by the spring of Marcus's second year in prison, David's actions had become impossible to misinterpret. It started with small boundary violations. David would arrive at their apartment without calling first, often letting himself in with the spare key Isabella had given him for emergencies. He would stay later than necessary, after helping with household tasks, settling into their living room as if he belonged there permanently. His conversations with Isabella began to focus increasingly on Marcus's shortcomings and the ways that his imprisonment had revealed his fundamental selfishness. "A real man would have found another way," David said one evening, as they cleaned up after dinner. "Marcus chose the easy path, instead of fighting for his family. He chose to abandon you rather than face his problems honestly." Isabella found these comments deeply unsettling, but she struggled to respond effectively. Part of her shared similar frustrations with Marcus's choices, and David's criticism seemed to give voice to doubts she had been suppressing. David also began making observations about Isabella's appearance and personality that felt inappropriate given their circumstances. "You have grown so much stronger over this past year," he would tell her. "Marcus never appreciated how intelligent and capable you are. He treated you like someone who needed to be protected instead of recognizing you as an equal partner." These comments always came during moments when Isabella felt particularly vulnerable or uncertain about her future. David seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense when she was struggling and to position himself as the solution to her problems. The financial assistance that had been so crucial during the early months of Marcus's incarceration began to come with strings attached. David would remind Isabella of his generosity during moments when she expressed independence or when she talked about plans that did not include him. "I have invested so much in helping you rebuild," he said during one particularly tense conversation. "I hope you understand that my support comes from a place of genuine care, not just obligation to Marcus." Isabella began to feel trapped between gratitude and growing unease. Without David's help, she could not afford their apartment or maintain the stability that Lucas and Sophie needed. But accepting his assistance seemed to come with an expectation of emotional availability that she was not prepared to provide. The situation became even more complex when David began expressing romantic interest directly. "Marcus will be in prison for another year," he said one evening, after the children had gone to bed. "You are a young, beautiful woman with needs that are not being met. There is no shame in acknowledging that you deserve companionship and affection." Isabella's response was immediate and firm. "David, I appreciate everything you have done for us, but I am not interested in that kind of relationship. I am still married, and I still love my husband. David's reaction to this rejection revealed a side of his personality that Isabella had never seen before. His usual charming demeanor shifted to something cold and calculating. "Love?" he laughed bitterly. "You love a man who destroyed your life to cover up his own criminal activities. You love someone who chose prison over staying home to take care of his family." Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. "Marcus made mistakes, but he is still the father of my children and my husband. Marcus is a coward and a criminal," David responded. "And you are wasting your life waiting for someone who never deserved you in the first place." From that night forward, David's behavior became increasingly manipulative and controlling. He would arrive at their apartment at odd hours, claiming he was concerned about their safety. He began questioning Isabella about her whereabouts when he could not reach her by phone. Most disturbingly, he started having private conversations with Lucas and Sophie about their father, subtly undermining Marcus's image and positioning himself as a more reliable father figure. "Your dad made some bad choices that hurt your mom," Isabella overheard him telling Lucas one afternoon. "Sometimes adults do things that seem right to them, but actually cause a lot of pain for the people they love." Isabella confronted David about these conversations, but he deflected her concerns with claims that he was simply trying to help the children process their father's absence. "They need to understand reality," he argued. "Protecting them from the truth about Marcus's choices will not help them in the long run." As months passed, Isabella began to feel like a prisoner in her own life. David's presence had become suffocating, but she could not figure out how to extract herself and the children from their dependence on his support without creating financial catastrophe. Her visits to Marcus became increasingly strained as well. She found herself unable to explain the complexity of her situation with David, partly because she feared that Marcus would blame himself for putting them in a position where they needed such assistance. During one visit, Marcus noticed her distress and pressed for details about their living situation. "David has been very helpful," Isabella said carefully, "but sometimes I feel like his expectations for our friendship have changed since you have been away." Marcus's expression darkened immediately. "What kind of expectations?" Isabella struggled to find words that would convey her discomfort without triggering the kind of explosive reaction that might make their situation worse. "He seems to think that your absence gives him certain rights or claims regarding our family. Has he touched you?" Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. "No, nothing like that," Isabella assured him quickly. "But he makes comments about our relationship, about what I deserve, about what you have done to us. Sometimes I feel like he is trying to convince me that our marriage was never as strong as I thought it was." Marcus was silent for several long moments, his jaw working as he processed this information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a tone that Isabella had never heard before. "Isabella, I need you to listen to me very carefully. David is not the man you think he is. When I get out of here, I will explain everything, but right now, I need you to be very careful around him. Do not let him isolate you from other friends or family. Do not let him convince you that his help comes without a price." "What are you saying?" Isabella asked, confused by the intensity of Marcus's reaction. "I am saying that there are things about David that you do not know, things that I could not tell you before because I was trying to protect you. But if he is pushing boundaries with you now, while I cannot be there to intervene, then the danger I was trying to prevent may be happening anyway." Isabella left that visit with more questions than answers. But Marcus's warning echoed in her mind as David's behavior continued to escalate. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in late autumn, nearly 2 years after Marcus's imprisonment began. David arrived at Isabella's apartment that evening with flowers and a bottle of wine, announcing that he had something important to discuss with her. Lucas and Sophie were at a sleepover with friends, leaving Isabella alone with a man whose intentions had become increasingly difficult to ignore. "I have been patient," David said, as he poured wine into glasses that Isabella had not asked for. "I have supported you and the children through the most difficult period of your lives. I have been here when Marcus could not be, and I have proven my loyalty in ways that he never did." Isabella remained standing near the apartment door, maintaining distance between herself and David. "I appreciate your help, David." But nothing, David interrupted, his voice taking on an edge that made Isabella's pulse quicken. "Marcus is gone. He chose crime over family, prison over responsibility. You owe him nothing, and you owe me everything. Isabella felt fear creeping up her spine. David's usual charm had been replaced by something predatory and demanding. I think you should leave, David laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Leave? Isabella, I have invested 2 years of my life in rebuilding what Marcus destroyed. I have spent thousands of dollars keeping you afloat. I have been a father to his children and a support system for his wife. You cannot simply dismiss me when I ask for what I have earned. Earned. Isabella backed closer to the door. David, friendship and support are not transactions. I never promised you anything beyond gratitude. Gratitude, David repeated mockingly. I do not want your gratitude, Isabella. I want what Marcus never appreciated. I want the life that he threw away through his stupidity and selfishness. Isabella reached for the door handle, but David moved quickly to block her path. For the first time since Marcus's imprisonment, she felt genuinely afraid for her physical safety. You are not going anywhere until we finish this conversation, David said, his voice low and threatening. You are going to listen to some truths that you have been avoiding for 2 years. David, please. Marcus did not commit those crimes to protect you, David said, his words hitting Isabella like a physical blow. He committed them because I forced him to choose between his freedom and your lives. Isabella felt the world tilt around her. What are you talking about? David's expression shifted to something resembling satisfaction, as if he had been waiting years to reveal this information. The people Marcus owed money to, the threats against your family. That was all me, Isabella. I orchestrated every bit of it. Isabella's knees nearly buckled. That is impossible. You helped us. You have been taking care of us. I have been taking care of you because I wanted to, David corrected. But Marcus went to prison because I made sure he had no other choice. The room seemed to spin as Isabella tried to process this revelation. Why would you do that? David's mask finally slipped completely, revealing a cold calculation that Isabella had never seen before. Because I wanted his life. I wanted his wife, his children, his place in this community. And Marcus was too good, too honest, too perfect for me to compete with fairly. Isabella felt sick to her stomach. The gambling debts, the people who threatened us, all fabricated, David admitted with a shrug. I hired actors to make the phone calls. I created the fake debt story. I manipulated Marcus into believing that you and the children were in danger from people who did not even exist. But why did Marcus confess? Why did he plead guilty if there was no real threat? David's smile was cruel, because by the time he realized the truth, he had already committed real crimes trying to solve a fake problem. The insurance fraud, the arson, the false police reports, those were all completely real. I just gave him the motivation to dig his own grave. Isabella felt rage building in her chest, but beneath it was a terror that threatened to overwhelm her. If David was capable of this level of manipulation and deception, what else might he do to get what he wanted? You destroyed our family, she whispered. I liberated you from a man who was holding you back, David corrected. Marcus was small town, small-minded, and small in his ambitions. You deserve so much more than running an auto shop and raising children in this backwater community. Isabella backed toward the kitchen, desperately trying to think of a way to escape or call for help. You are insane. I am practical, David replied, following her movement. I identified what I wanted, and I developed a plan to obtain it. Marcus made it easy by being so predictable in his nobility and self-sacrifice. As Isabella reached for her phone on the kitchen counter, David grabbed her wrist. You are not calling anyone, Isabella. We are going to work this out between us, like adults. But what David did not know was that Isabella's phone had been recording their conversation since the moment he began his confession. A safety feature she had activated months earlier, when his behavior first began making her uncomfortable, had captured every word of his admission. More importantly, what neither Isabella nor David realized was that Lucas had returned early from his sleepover after feeling sick and had been listening from the hallway for the past several minutes. The 7-year-old boy, who had inherited his father's strong sense of right and wrong, had heard enough to understand that the man they had trusted with their lives was responsible for destroying their family. With the kind of quick thinking that would have made Marcus proud, Lucas quietly slipped out of the apartment and ran to the nearest neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who immediately called the police. The police arrived at Isabella's apartment within minutes of Mrs. Rodriguez's call, but not before David had revealed even more damaging information in his desperate attempt to convince Isabella to accept his version of their future. "I can give you things Marcus never could," he had continued, apparently unaware that his confession was being recorded and that help was on the way. "Financial security, travel, a life beyond this small town. All you have to do is accept that Marcus is the past, and I am your future." When officers knocked on the apartment door, David's demeanor shifted instantly from predatory confidence to panic. Isabella used his momentary distraction to break free and let the police into the apartment. The recording on Isabella's phone provided immediate evidence of David's confession, but investigators would soon discover that his crimes extended far beyond the manipulation of Marcus and his family. A thorough investigation of David's financial records revealed a pattern of client fraud dating back nearly 5 years. The cocaine addiction and gambling debts he had attributed to himself during his manipulation of Marcus were actually accurate descriptions of his real behavior, but the victims of his theft were his investment clients rather than fictional criminals. David had used Marcus's situation as a convenient cover for his own criminal activities. While Marcus was being investigated and prosecuted for insurance fraud, David had been quietly liquidating client accounts and transferring money to cover his personal debts and addiction-related expenses. The fabricated debt story had served multiple purposes. It removed Marcus as a potential obstacle to David's romantic pursuit of Isabella. It provided a distraction from his own financial crimes, and it positioned him as the hero who stepped in to support a family in crisis. More disturbing details emerged as investigators interviewed David's former colleagues and clients. Several people reported that David had made inappropriate comments about Isabella over the years, expressing envy toward Marcus and making remarks about what he would do differently if he were in Marcus's position. One former client recalled David saying, "Marcus Thompson has no idea how lucky he is. If Isabella were my wife, I would never take her for granted the way he does." Another colleague remembered David's reaction to Marcus and Isabella's wedding 8 years earlier. David seemed genuinely upset that Marcus was getting married. He made comments about how Marcus did not deserve someone like Isabella, and how some people get everything handed to them without working for it. These revelations painted a picture of obsession and resentment that had been building for years before David finally acted on his feelings. When Marcus learned of David's arrest and confession, his reaction was a mixture of rage, relief, and profound sadness. During his first phone call with Isabella after David's exposure, he struggled to find words for the betrayal they had both experienced. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was protecting you from strangers. I never imagined that the real threat was someone we trusted completely." Isabella's own emotions were equally complex. Relief that Marcus had been vindicated was mixed with anger at the 2 years of suffering they had endured unnecessarily. But beneath those feelings was a profound gratitude that the truth had finally emerged before David's manipulation could cause even more damage. "How did you know?" she asked Marcus during one of their phone conversations. "During our visit last month, you warned me about David. What made you suspicious?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. "There were small things that never made sense. David knew details about the threats that I had never shared with him. He seemed too comfortable with the situation, too quick to offer help, and when you told me about his behavior toward you, I realized that his support might not be as selfless as it appeared." The legal process that followed moved quickly once David's confession was analyzed alongside the evidence of his other crimes. David ultimately pled guilty to fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and multiple counts of theft from his investment clients. His sentence totaled 12 years in federal prison. More importantly for Marcus and his family, David's confession provided the evidence necessary to overturn Marcus's conviction. While Marcus had technically committed the crimes for which he was imprisoned, the revelation that he had been manipulated through fabricated threats constituted grounds for appeal based on duress and coercion. Marcus's attorney, working pro bono after learning the full details of the case, argued successfully that Marcus's actions were the direct result of David's criminal manipulation, and that no reasonable person would have made different choices when faced with credible threats against their family's safety. After 26 months in prison, Marcus was released and his conviction was overturned. The insurance companies, faced with evidence that Marcus's crimes were the result of an elaborate deception, dropped their restitution claims and even provided compensation for the damages his family had suffered. The reunion between Marcus, Isabella, Lucas, and Sophie took place on a sunny Tuesday morning in March. As Marcus walked out of the correctional facility, he saw his family waiting near the parking area, and the distance that had separated them for over 2 years seemed to disappear in an instant. Lucas, now 8 years old and significantly taller than when his father had left, ran toward Marcus with an enthusiasm that brought tears to everyone watching. Sophie, who had been too young to fully understand the situation when Marcus was imprisoned, held back shyly until her father knelt down and opened his arms. Isabella approached more slowly, the weight of everything they had endured visible in her expression. When Marcus stood up and looked into her eyes, both of them recognized that their relationship would require time and effort to rebuild, but that the foundation of love and trust was still intact. "I am so sorry," Marcus said, echoing the words he had spoken during their phone conversations. "We survived," Isabella replied simply, "and now we know who our real friends are." The Thompson family's recovery was not instantaneous, but it was genuine and sustained. Marcus returned to work in the automotive industry, eventually opening a new shop with financial backing from community members who had followed their situation and wanted to support their fresh start. Isabella continued teaching, finding that her experience with adversity had given her new insights into helping children who faced challenges at home. Lucas and Sophie, with the help of counseling and their parents' patient support, worked through the confusion and anger that had resulted from David's manipulation. Perhaps most significantly, the family developed a deeper appreciation for honesty and direct communication. Marcus made a commitment never again to keep important information from Isabella, even if his intentions were protective. Isabella learned to trust her instincts about people and situations, recognizing that her initial discomfort with David's behavior had been valid. The community of Riverside rallied around the Thompson family in ways that surprised even their closest friends. The local newspaper ran a series of articles about their situation that sparked conversations about friendship, loyalty, and the importance of questioning behavior that seems too good to be true. Marcus often reflected on the lessons their experience had taught them. David showed us that some people view relationships as transactions, he told Isabella during one of their evening conversations. But he also showed us how many people genuinely care about doing the right thing without expecting anything in return. 6 months after Marcus's release, the family participated in a community forum about financial fraud and manipulation tactics. Their willingness to share their experience publicly helped other families recognize warning signs of similar deception. During his presentation, Marcus emphasized the importance of honest communication, even in difficult circumstances. "I thought I was protecting my family by handling the threats alone, but isolation and secrecy created the perfect environment for David's manipulation to succeed. If I had trusted Isabella with the truth from the beginning, we might have found a different solution." Isabella added her own perspective about the gradual nature of manipulative behavior. "David's transition from helpful friend to controlling presence happened so slowly that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Trust your instincts when someone's behavior makes you uncomfortable, even if you cannot immediately explain why." 2 years after Marcus's release, the Thompson family had not only recovered from their ordeal, but had found ways to use their experience to help others. They had rebuilt their finances, strengthened their marriage, and created new friendships based on genuine mutual support, rather than hidden agendas. Marcus's new auto shop had become a gathering place for community members who valued the kind of honest dealing and straightforward communication that the Thompson family represented. Isabella had been promoted to assistant principal at her school, where her experience with crisis and recovery made her particularly effective at helping struggling students and families. Lucas and Sophie, now 10 years old, had developed a maturity and insight that surprised the adults around them. They understood, in age-appropriate terms, that some people pretend to be friends while actually having selfish motivations, but they had also learned that most people are genuinely good and deserving of trust. The family established an annual tradition of volunteering with organizations that support crime victims and their families. Their experience had taught them that recovery from betrayal and manipulation requires both time and community support. On the 3rd anniversary of Marcus's release, Isabella reflected on how much their lives had changed. We lost a friend who was never really a friend, but we gained a deeper understanding of what real friendship looks like. We learned that love and loyalty cannot be taken for granted, but they also cannot be destroyed by people who do not understand their value. Marcus added his own observation. David thought he could force his way into our family by removing me from the picture, but he never understood that love is not something you can steal or manipulate. It is something you earn through honesty, consistency, and genuine care for other people's well-being. The Thompson family's experience serves as a powerful reminder that the most dangerous threats often come from people we trust completely. But it also demonstrates that truth, love, and genuine community support can overcome even the most calculated deception. If this true crime account has opened your eyes to the hidden dangers that can lurk within our closest relationships, you are not alone in wanting to learn more about how ordinary families navigate extraordinary betrayals and emerge stronger than before. Subscribe to True Crime Village for more incredible accounts of survival, redemption, and the triumph of truth over manipulation. And remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest developments in cases that prove love and justice can prevail, even in the darkest circumstances.